Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is Who Cares, where we're going to discuss and debate the Doctor on his adventures through space and time.
So prepare your body for an episode with more horrifying implications than the end of Love and Monsters.
Everyone, as I said, this is Who Cares. I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And today we're going to be discussing Listen, written by Steven Moffat. And this is actually the first time Moffat's written an episode by himself that wasn't a bookend to a season in quite a while. Maybe since he became showrunner, I don't quite remember, but I know he's mostly done the beginnings of seasons, the endings of seasons, and specials, usually.
Yeah, and we can tell from the outset that this is going to be one of those episodes that you either love or you hate.
I personally love this episode, and I know Jake does too. And I've already seen people on the internet since it came out like an hour ago, basically, that are like, oh, this is terrible, the ending doesn't make sense. But no, I really enjoy it, and of course, over the course of this episode, we will explain why.
So, the episode begins.
The Doctor is in the TARDIS, and this is actually, I think, a brilliant cold open for this episode. It's very good. He's in the TARDIS, and he's just talking to himself with a candle, and he says, question. I actually think it seems like if this Doctor has anything close to a catchphrase, it's question. He questions things.
He starts a sentence with the phrase of speech that it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because he'll say, like, question, answer. He does that.
I don't think he'll have like a catchphrase the same way that Tennant or Smith did.
No, allons-y.
But that's the closest I think we're going to get to that. Yeah. Anyway, he begins by saying, question, why when we are alone do we speak to ourselves? And then he says, conjecture, because we're really not alone. And he goes on a little montage where he says, evolution has created perfect hunting, cut to lions hunting. It's created perfect defense, cut to blowfish. And then he says, so why hasn't it created perfect hiding? And the implication here is that there's some creature that has evolved to be completely out of sight of any living being. It's just that well hidden from us.
And how would you know if something was built to perfectly hide? Because it's perfect at hiding.
My one harp on this concept is, well, the Doctor's already kind of met them. They're called the Silence. But okay, whatever. For the sake of the episode, I'll let it go. After the theme song, we cut to Clara on a date with Danny, who we met in the previous episodes, and it's not going well. She brings up the soldier thing. He's very defensive about it. He says basically, well, it's okay, but, people like you sometimes get, bad info on what soldiers do, and she says, people like me, and then whatever.
I like how they're approaching this relationship, because almost every time in a TV relationship, it's like all hunky-dory, or it's like a fabricated, kind of forced thing, but this feels like they're really just both bad at dating. And it feels natural, and it doesn't feel forced, and they're both very charming, and it works, and you giggle a little bit, and it's a good thing, and it's setting up the romance that clearly is going to happen later down the road.
So Clara comes back home, she's all upset, she has her heels off, and she's like, burr, 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 opens her door, runs into the TARDIS, because it's blocking her door. The Doctor is sitting at her makeup table, and he makes a joke about, why do you need 3 mirrors? But then he basically says, I need your help with something, as this Doctor often does when he runs into Clara. She comes on, he explains, I think everyone who's ever lived has had this same exact dream. And he gives a description of a dream where it's, you think you wake up, you put your feet over the bed, and then something grabs you from under the bed. So he says to Clara, okay, so we're going to go back in your timeline to see when you had this dream, because it's implied she has had this dream at some point in her life. If you've noticed on Capaldi's new console, it does have some different panels that Smith had. One of them looks like it's made of fleshlights.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It looks gross.
Yeah, it looks sticky and kind of moist.
That's kind of the point, though. He explains it's like a telepathic circuit. You can kind of touch it and tell the TARDIS where you want to go. Which I guess you could kind of fan canon this and say, well, this is one of the reasons Capaldi's so good at flying the TARDIS. He can just touch it and tell it where he wants it to go.
Guess.
Arguable, but we've never seen him do it. But whatever. She puts her hands on it. The Doctor says specifically, because it's a plot point later, I've turned the safeguards of the TARDIS off, and we're going to send us back along your timeline.
And this is important because usually the TARDIS won't go and cross timelines on purpose because it's, against time travel. So this is kind of an effort to get Clara in her own timeline so that we can see if she's had the dream, and then the Doctor can unravel the mystery. But she gets distracted because of the fight she had with Danny Pink, So they end up with little tiny Danny.
Yeah, and they're at this home for boys, presumably.
Yeah.
And the doctor shows up, and he still thinks it's going to be Clara, but he goes and talks to the keeper of the place. He uses the psychic paper, which is one of my favorite things he ever does. I'm always excited when they use the psychic paper. It says inspection, whatever, talks to the guy. Clara, meanwhile, talks to Danny, who at this point is called Rupert. It's discovered that he changed his name at some point in his life.
Because he doesn't like Rupert, which is understandable. Rupert Pink is kind of a shitty name.
I thought it was weird that they even went with that, as if to try and trick the audience, as if it's not Danny at first.
I think maybe you were supposed to... It's like a mini reveal, like maybe you're supposed to think, oh, maybe it's like an ancestor or someone related to him.
See, I don't...
I don't think I was thrown by it. Maybe some people were.
But, like, it's like they say, oh, my name's Rupert Pink, and then he, like, waves his hand, but then it cuts
And then
back.
they cut to Danny.
Yeah, so it's like, you're making it obvious. Why are you even pretending? Although I guess it does sort of...
Maybe it'll pop up later.
Later in the episode, she does reveal that she knows his name is Rupert, and he's like, how did you know that? But... they could have come up with something else for them to fight about.
Fair enough.
Anyway, Clara goes up to see Danny, who's young, he's Rupert, and he's afraid of the dark. He's afraid he thinks there's something under his bed, because lo and behold, they have come to the point in his timeline where he is having this under-the-bed fear.
Right, so the psychic link sort of half worked.
Yeah.
She thought of Danny, but she also thought of the dream she probably had when she was a kid, and it kind of mixed them together.
Which has a plot to get them where they needed to go. Okay, it works.
It works.
She's good with kids. She's a teacher. She's like, there's nothing under the bed. Come under the bed with me. And they go under the bed, and it seems like everything's going to be fine, but then there's like a pressure and something sitting on the bed.
Oh, and it is very creepy. Don't get me wrong. This is probably the best episode for that since Blink.
Probably.
Which has been... anyone who watches Who knows that those episodes are like the best scary Who episodes.
I still think the Weeping Angels and Blink, not necessarily in the recurring... because
Blink is the best one.
Blink is actually a good kind of scary, quote unquote. I've never actually been scared by an episode of Doctor Who.
It's tense.
Yeah. Like, I think they have good horror concepts, but because it's basically a family show, they have to make them, family friendly.
Well, yeah. So there's a pressure on the bed, and then they get out from underneath, and there's something under the sheets, and it's super creepy.
Yeah.
It does a really good job of being quiet and still, and... as you know, usually what happens is this will end up being some sort of alien and they'll reveal it and it'll be crazy and stuff like that. But they do a great thing. They don't reveal it. They just let it be under the sheets and then
pan over and it's the doctor and he's sitting in a chair in the corner. And he makes a funny joke. For any Americans who don't know, the Where's Waldo books, everywhere else in the world he's known as Wally, not Waldo.
Which is bullshit.
So
it's Waldo, damn it.
They were actually made in the UK, so no, it is Wally. We changed it. But the doctor's looking at this random book and he goes, have you seen Wally? I can't find him. The kid goes, he's not in every book. And the doctor goes, oh, that's some years of my life I want back. Funny joke. And then Capaldi actually does a scene with this kid, and it's an excellent scene, especially considering when the scene is going, I always have in the back of my mind, this is a family show. A lot of, not like young kids, but kids probably from 8 to 12, they probably really like this show.
Sure.
And this is a really good scene for them because the doctor says, look at that thing on the bed. Are you scared? And the kid goes, yeah. And he goes, good. Being scared is a good thing. Your heart's beating super fast. I can feel it through your hands. Your mind is racing so fast you feel like you could slow down time. You can run faster and jump higher than you ever could in your entire life. The thing on the bed, it's not scared. You are the danger in this room. You're scared. It's a superpower. And that's a really good scene. That's a message you don't get for kids a lot. And
I like that this doctor particularly is good with kids.
Yeah. And then he says to Clara, okay, look out the window. And he says to Rupert, look out the window. And they look away from the thing that's covered in the blanket.
And they do such a good series of shots where they'll show it still standing behind them. They're talking. They're trying to, be like, hey, look at the view. Look how good this is. And then they start whispering to themselves like, okay, don't look at it. Don't give it what it wants. It wants you to look at it. Don't do it. And just be okay. And it's a really good series of shots, and they shoot it nice, and the thing behind it is blurry.
Yeah, and Clara says to the doctor, so what is that thing? And he goes, well, 2 theories. 1, it's just one of Rupert's friends playing a joke on him, or 2, I don't know what it is, but we need to keep looking this way. Eventually the thing does decide to go away, out of focus in a blur. You see the take off the sheet, and it runs away really quick, and you don't really get a clear look at it at all. Then the door slams, the doctor and Clara are like, I don't know what that was, but okay. And the kid's still scared. And now the doctor's not as helpful.
Yeah.
Clara says to the kid, what are these? And it's a box of toy soldiers, and he says, oh, they're the facilities. And she goes, no, these are yours now. Takes them out, puts them under the bed, and says, they're going to defend you. Pulls out one in particular. It's broken. It doesn't have a gun.
Rupert says, that can't help me. He doesn't even have a gun. And Clara explains, well, that's why he's the best one. He doesn't even need a gun. He can protect the whole world.
And I like when she says that, too. The doctor's in the background of the shot. It's
Yeah.
it's a reflection, obviously. And she says, what's this one's name? And he says, I call that one Dan the Soldier Man. And obviously...
Now it's Danny Pink.
It's obviously that this kid is Danny from the past. So then they decide to leave. They're back on the TARDIS. And the doctor's like, did you know that kid? Why did we end up there? And she lies and says she has no idea who he is. She says, can you take me back to that date? Because I'd like to try that again. So she goes back. They land next to the restaurant right after she stormed out of the restaurant at the beginning of the episode. Mm-hmm. She goes back, tries again, goes a little better at first, but she lets it slip that she knows his real name is Rupert. And he's like, how did you know that? This is weird. No one knows that. How do you know that?
Yeah, she kind of lies to him a little bit, and he doesn't like that because he can tell when people are lying to him. So he gets mad, storms out. All the while, in the background of this conversation, there's an astronaut. So you assume it's the doctor going like, hey, Clara, need you again. So she gets up, leaves the table after he's already gone, walks into the TARDIS. Turns out the guy who plays Danny Pink is in the astronaut suit, but he's not Danny Pink.
Yeah, the doctor explains, this guy, his name is Orson Pink. He's from 100 years in your future. Mm-hmm. Traces of your DNA or whatever are still left in the TARDIS, so I used that to extrapolate a timeline. Somehow, he's part of your future. Do you know him? She lies again, says, I don't know. And then she asks, where did you find him? And the doctor explains, well... Cuts to the future. It's now the end of the universe. Again, because we've seen that in Utopia. Yeah. But this is a different end of the universe. I don't know. Arguably, it could just be further in the future or not quite as far in the future as Utopia, but, whatever. Get past it. It's Doctor Who.
But, so, how we find out that he got there is he was basically the pioneer of time travel for the human race, and...
It's actually seemed like it was very similar to the program that happened in, if you remember the episode Hyde, where they're in the 1960s mansion. That was a time traveler.
So, anyways, they planned on sending him forward, like, halfway into the week, end up sending him to the end of the universe because, oops, we don't know how to actually time travel well, so it's kind of neat.
The doctor says, basically, we're gonna take him home, but he's also hearing things outside. There's nothing left in the universe. Outside of this little planetoid, there should be nothing at all. But the door's locked, and the doctor notices this and realizes something's wrong. So he lies to Orson and says, well, we can't take you home right away. The TARDIS has to charge, which is actually very reminiscent of the first Doctor in his second series of episodes, tells the school teachers that, oh, we can't leave Skaro because this piece of the TARDIS is broken. We gotta go get Mercury for it. So another one of those the Doctor lies moments.
Yeah.
So him and Clara sit there and they wait, and then the ship starts making noises. He says, well, it could just be the hull cooling or something else. Then there starts to be a knock at the door, or what sounds like a knock at the door.
And then it starts to get a little bit louder, and he's like, you, get in the TARDIS, and she doesn't want to. And they have this moment where he kind of like tells her, when you're with me, you have to listen to me. These are the rules. Do as you're told.
So he does try and open the door. Meanwhile, Clara's on the TARDIS trying to look through the monitors, but of course they start not working, so she can't see what's happening. He opens the door, the place depressurizes, and the screens go blank, and you don't see what happens. Orson goes out, saves him, brings him in, but he has a knock on the head, and he's passed out, and they say, well, there's a bunch of stuff flying around, it's probably that, right? And they're like, yeah, probably, right? So Clara decides they need to get out of there because they're pretty afraid of the things that may or may not be happening.
So she sticks all 10 fingers into fleshlights that are attached to the console of the TARDIS, and they go into some timeline. She hopes to be, back in her own time. But, as you can expect, she's a little distracted. And just like last time, she kind of mixes two timelines. But who is it this time?
She gets out of the TARDIS and she's in seemingly a barn. It's covered in straw. Oh. She starts climbing up this sort of ladder up to almost a loft area.
And she hears a child crying underneath the covers.
And then she hears the door's about to open, so she goes, oh no, I don't want anyone to catch me. I don't even know where I am. She hides under this kid's bed. Mm-hmm. The people come in and they're having a discussion. They're talking to each other and they say, why is he crying all the time? And she goes, he just gets scared in the dark. And he says, he's not going to get into the army doing that. And she says, he doesn't want to join the army. And he says, well, he's certainly not getting into the academy. That kid'll never make a Time Lord. And there's the twist. It turns out this young kid is the Doctor, the first Doctor as a young kid.
And he kind of has the same haircut. As they never show his face. What they do is they show the top of his head and his, like, ankles and feet.
Yeah, very similar to the first Doctor haircut, though, which he kept that hairdo for 200 years. Good for him.
That's impressive.
Unless he had, like, a weird stage in between where he maybe had a mohawk. I don't know.
No, it was
I don't know what he was doing.
hawk. He was definitely a faux hawk kid. It's less time that Matt Smith had his same haircut, though, when he was on.
That's fair. But Clara realizes who it is and freaks out. So the two adults leave this barn. The kid starts to stand up, but Clara knows that the TARDIS is in the corner. She can't have this kid, who she now realizes is probably the Doctor, can't go see the TARDIS. That'd be crossing timelines, whatever. Mm-hmm. And she grabs his ankle, and then she realizes, oh no, I'm the reason he kind of has this...
belief that everyone has this dream.
Yeah. And she says to him, just get back in bed, this is just a dream.
It's okay.
And then he does so. And then we cut back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor's on it, and he wakes up, and he's like, where are we? What happened? Clara walks in. She basically reveals there was no monster in this entire episode. The Doctor just had this irrational fear and was trying to explain it away by this monster. And it turns out that monster that was in the kid's room, it was just one of his friends, probably, playing a trick on him.
Yeah.
The banging on the door, it was just the hull cooling all along. And that's actually a really creative idea for an episode of Doctor Who.
Because in Doctor Who, there's always a monster.
But in
always.
Yeah, and in this one, it isn't. It's just diving into the Doctor's psyche, basically, and how he sees the world.
And it's beautiful. It works so well. And I see a lot of people being like, I hate this. I can't believe I don't get it. How do you not get it? It's borderline spoon-fed to you. They give you the answer at the end of the episode.
I know. I've seen things on the internet already where people were like, well, what was the thing on the bed? It was nothing. That was the point. It was a friend of the kids. They explained it in the episode. It's not like it's that subtle. But beyond that, I thought that was a very good reveal. And then the Doctor says, where are we? And Clara says, just take off. Don't ever look where we've been. Just go. And he says, I don't take orders from you, Clara. And she repeats to him what he said to her when he wanted her to go in the TARDIS. She says, do as you're told. And he does so, and the TARDIS kind of leaves, and it looks like it's coming out of this rift in space, basically, presumably because it was on Gallifrey. And then it cuts back to when she was talking to the young Doctor, and it shows a speech she gave him. And it's actually a wonderful speech.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And she says to the Doctor, very similar to what he said to that young kid, you know, it's okay to be scared. We're all scared sometimes, as long as you understand it's okay to be scared. Scared can make you faster and stronger. And you don't have to worry about being afraid, because sometimes it doesn't have to make you cruel or cowardly. It can make you kind. And it cuts back and forth between her going back to see Danny again as an adult, and they kind of get together.
And them talking about how scared they are to even be dating, and how it's, you know, and it's juxtaposed really nicely about how, like, you know, being scared can make things work sometimes, and that's kind of how it is. People get scared, even if it's something as simple as falling in love and dating. People are scared of that.
And the final line in the episode is, she says to him, and this line is important, she says, fear is a constant companion, and it goes through you all throughout your life, and that's okay. Fear makes companions of us all, which is actually, it is a good line, but more importantly, that's actually a direct quote from the first Doctor. Again, this season we're getting so many classic Who references, it's really cool. So that's actually a line from the first Doctor, if you didn't know, from his second episode, I think? Second or third. He was basically saying it to Ian or Barbara, I don't remember which. This clip will show you.
You're trying to help me.
Fear makes companions of all of us. That's right.
I never once thought you were afraid.
Fear is with all of us and always will be. Just like that other sensation that lives with it.
What's that?
Well, your companion referred to it. Hope.
But yeah, overall, this episode was excellent. I really enjoyed the whole thing at the end, the pathos of the Doctor and explaining, yeah, he might be scared sometimes, just like everyone is, but he uses that. He doesn't let that stop him. He might be scared even if he doesn't show it, but he's using that to be braver, if that makes sense. He's using it to be better. I thought this episode was excellent. It really was, and I'll rewatch it. It was really good. I like that speech at the end. I like the message. Very good episode, and people who hate Moffat are gonna hate it because Moffat wrote it, but I thought it was a good episode. Now, this is normally where we would talk about the Missy theories, but there was absolutely no mention of Missy or the Promised Land in this episode.
Which is fine with me because it didn't need it.
I know. But we do have to talk a little bit about next week. So next week we have Time Heist, which is ostensibly a Doctor Who bank heist episode, which I think sounds awesome.
It looks awesome, and basically the idea is they get into this bank and then they wake up and their memories are wiped because in this bank it detects guilt. So they have to steal a thing that they don't know, and they can't know it because they could be guilty of and be caught. It sounds like a really cool. That's so Doctor Who.
Yeah. So, we'll get to that next week. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been Who Cares?
I don't know. Do you guys care?